Hi there, and welcome to my podcast show, and I'm your host, I know Murchu. So right now we're in the middle of a phenomenal global transformation with technology, and we're seeing a new class growing. It's called the Precariat class. The Precariat refers to people whose jobs and incomes are basically insecure, a blend of precarious and proletariat. In economics and sociology, the Precariat is a social class comprising of people suffering from both precarity. It's a precarious existence which lacks job security, predictability, or material welfare. This class of people, the Precariat, they lack job security. Many economists and sociologists say that the Precariat has emerged as a result of entrenched neoliberal capitalism. I caught up with Guy Standing. Guy is a British professor of development studies at the University of London. He co-founded the Basic Income Earth Network. He's also author of the book, The Precariat, the New Dangerous Class. And he argues that globalization has pushed more and more people into the Precariat, which he describes as a new emerging class.
My name's Guy Standing. I'm currently a professorial research associate of SOAS, University of London. SOAS is School of Oriental and African Studies. But I'm not only a development economist, I've also been a labour economist all my adult life. And I was a co-founder and now honorary co-president of BIEN, which is the Basic Income Earth Network. So much of my time is spent writing on basic income and talking about basic income. But today I think we're going to be starting with the growth of the Precariat and then come to basic income.
Exactly. You've been covering this topic, Guy, of the basic income for some time now. So, I mean, I suppose firstly, why now? Why has it become sort of a topical subject? I mean, obviously the technology has changed many things, but, you know, what's led up to it becoming such a big issue now?
Well, I think I've been working on basic income for over 30 years. That's how much we've been working collectively and around the world. And undoubtedly in the last 2 or 3 years, we've suddenly become mainstream. For a long time, people regarded basic income as unrealistic or utopian, or just didn't understand it. But the last 2 or 3 years, huge number of people have come round, including prominent Silicon Valley people, including people on the left and on the right. And there's a real energy out there. And we've just had our Congress in Lisbon, our 17th International Congress, and hundreds of people came from about 50 countries. So you can tell there's a real growing energy, and a lot of fantastic people have been joining. It's open to everybody. And I think the reason that it's suddenly become mainstream is a matter of what I call a perfect storm of factors have come together that have made it almost essential. The first of those things is that with globalization, with the neoliberal economic policies that governments have followed, labour market flexibility and so on, and with the Silicon Valley automation trends, we're seeing a new class structure in the world in which the growing class of people is the Precariat. Now, the Precariat are millions and millions of people who are facing a life of unstable labour, a lot of work that doesn't get remunerated or recognised, a casualisation of their life. They are having to rely on money wages that are volatile and falling in value. Wages are stagnating in many, many countries, all across the OECD countries. And they're living on unsustainable debt, where one mistake, one illness, one accident can tip them into almost suicidal homelessness and all of those problems. They are losing the rights of citizenship, often without knowing it, within their own countries. They don't have to be migrants to be in those circumstances, although many migrants are also losing rights. So the growth of the Precariat is epitomized by millions of people having chronic economic insecurity. And they cannot get economic security from the existing state benefits, which are means tested, behavior tested increasingly in many, many, many countries, if not all. There's been a growth of the number of people dependent on means tested benefits. Now, what that means is that they have to prove that they're poor in order to get access to benefits. And if you have to prove that you're poor, then you have to prove that you're deserving poor. And if you manage to get benefits, what it means is if you go from benefits into the sort of low-wage jobs that people in the precariat can expect to get, you face a marginal tax rate of over 80%. And that means that they only gain an extra 20% if they go from benefits into the sort of low-wage jobs they can expect to obtain, which is a huge disincentive, especially as they've got extra costs to meet when they go into a job, commuting and so on, and they have the prospect of going back into having to rely on benefits again, but waiting for some considerable time. So there are huge disincentives for the precariat to take low-wage jobs. So that means that the state is increasingly resorting to punishments and sanctions and all the various other things that go with that. So the precariat is the first factor, because the part of the precariat are what I call atavists. They're fallen out of the old working class, and they are anxious, they are insecure, but they're also very angry. And this part is voting for the Donald Trumps, and they're voting for Brexit. They're voting for Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilders and other neo-fascist populists. And this is a very dangerous trend. And I think this is one of the major factors why some chief executives who you would not expect to be supporting basic income are coming out in favor because they see the political dangers of having people chronically insecure. The second major factor is the advance of the robots. I don't believe that we're suddenly going to have nothing to do where it will be made redundant because the robots will be doing everything. I think there's plenty of work for us to do, care work, voluntary work, civil work, all sorts of work that we want to do. But I think much of the work that we're doing is going to be unremunerated. There won't be a wage for it. And therefore, the disruptions of the technological change could mean that more and more of the income goes to the possessors of the robots, possessors of the technology, possessors of the intellectual property rights, the patents, the copyrights, and so on. And I think that the distributional consequences are such that inequality has become dangerously high and shows every sign of continuing to grow. So this inequality is an extra factor. We need a new income distribution system whereby a basic income would be, in a sense, a share of the rental income gained by the possessors of the robots and all the high-tech means of production and so on. So that is the second. The third factor, I think, is the ecological crisis. And we need eco-taxes, carbon taxes. But the trouble with carbon taxes and eco-taxes is that they tend to be proportionately higher for the poor than for the rich. And therefore, they only make sense if you can have a carbon tax and dividend, the dividend being paid as a basic income, because that's worth more for the poor than for the rich. So these combinations of factors, I think, is why suddenly many more people are supporting a basic income.
So it's just like it's all kind of coming together, you know, lining up all at the same time. So we really do, we do. We currently have a situation, don't we? Especially with the incoming automation. The term is a platform economy, because anybody who owns a platform has got users on the platform. I mean, they're going to make money, and the money is going to go all the way up to the top. That's always been the case. but it's a bit rich coming for them.
I think the growth of platform capitalism has to be confronted as a rentier economy. It's rentier capitalism, and the apps are essentially like labor brokers, where the possessors of the apps are taking 20%, 30% of every labor transaction. And we're only at the birth of this process. It's going to get much more substantial as a way of organizing labor, but it's clearly got to be rethought, regulated, and we've got to have a new system of distribution. I think that what we're going to be doing, and I certainly favor this, is that there has to be a levy on all forms of rental income, most of all those associated with the platform capitalism, and that the incomes have to be put into sovereign wealth funds, democratic wealth funds, and then with the ability to pay out a basic income would gradually increase through sovereign wealth funds, as they do in Alaska, as they do in Norway, and as many people want in some other countries. So the growth of platform capitalism is really pointing in a direction of altering the income distribution system as such. This is the theme of my final chapter in the book, Corruption of Capitalism. Yeah, it's published, it came out last year, it's now in paperback. It's called The Corruption of Capitalism, Why Rentiers Thrive and Work Does Not Pay. Published by Byteback, and at the moment it gets giving a lot of talks on it around the world. You can order it online,
Yeah, through Amazon. Yeah, and make them even richer. Yeah, no,
and it's not expensive.
Okay, good. I'll attach the link as well to the podcast, Guy.
The main chapter of interest to you in the book is chapter 6, which is on platform capitalism.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to go check that out. There's no way around what's happened. There's been a change, but technology is moving. This is another thing that happens. The pace of technology is changing so fast. The governments really can't keep up. It's kind of like the horse is bolted out of the stable. Like, how do you go and get it back?
I mean, I think that technology is very disruptive. It's very rapidly developing. The governments are behind the curve. We know that in terms of developing new forms of regulations over contracts, new regulations over bargaining procedures, new regulations on redress for things like non-payment. A lot of the brokers are often refusing to pay people online, claiming that their work is not good or it hasn't been finished in time or something like that. Well, you know, it's a very asymmetrical relationship between people who can just refuse to pay and the people down the end of the line don't have any power or the ability to seek redress. That sort of thing has to be dealt with. And I do think that governments have been rather slow and haphazard about responding to this. It's a major area, and things like the Taylor Report in Britain has just missed the opportunity for addressing this. It is something that is developing remarkably fast. So, you know, you're right to emphasize the need there.
But the 9 to 5 is a concept that's really for a bygone era.
No, I think the question there is, you're absolutely right. The idea of a 9 to 5 block of time that you spend in labour, in a job, etc., is dying rapidly. And our official labour statistics, the way that the governments measure employment and unemployment and economic activity, it is unfit for purpose. It's just a disgrace now. It's just not appropriate. And we need to reconceptualize what is work. We need to recognize that a lot of people have to do a lot of work off workplaces, outside formal working hours, and that is almost a norm. And for the precariat, it is undoubtedly the norm. Then they have to do a hell of a lot of work for which they don't get paid, including waiting around for labour, and filling in forms all the time and things like that. And that's what I've written about in the books on the precariat. And a lot of people write to me saying this is their life. They spend a lot of time working without gaining any money at all, and it's very stressful. And this is the reality of the platform capitalism that is coming. It's going to get much worse, and more. It's a mockery that our labor statistics record figures, so many people in employment, so many people not employment. This is just not accurate. But this, unfortunately, has not risen to the priority it should be in official statistics.
You have to confront it.
Yeah, it has to be confronted.
You mentioned at the start of the conversation that a lot of people that are the precariat sort of strata of society, they are really a place where they're at is really bad. What do you see like the future? What are the possibilities for kind of bringing a bit of, are there any solutions? Where are the solutions?
I think basic income is undoubtedly part of the solution. I think that if everybody had a basic income, it would give them at least some security. It would increase their bargaining position. It would enable women to move out of oppressive relationships that they only stay in because of financial need, that sort of thing. So a basic income must be part of the strategy in these circumstances. But there are other forms of action that are required, like regulations on recruitment procedures, regulations on contracts that have to be more open to enable people to have contracts that are binding on employers and labor brokers in platform capitalism. So there are lots of things that needs to be done at the same time, and a realization that the income distribution system must be changed, I think is the fundamental call that I would make, because expecting real wages to rise on average is just ridiculous. In Austria or in Ireland or in Britain or in the United States, real wages on average, the real purchasing power of wages, will not go up in the foreseeable future in a sustained way. They might fluctuate a bit, but the trend over the last 30 years has been stagnation and decline in wages. Therefore, the system as such needs to be reformed. And that's the main message I would give to you.
Thanks for listening and checking out my podcast. You can head over to Spotify and find my podcast there, or on Apple iTunes. Subscribe to my podcast on my website. You can head over to www.inaom.io for further details.